What is social media? I get asked this question a fair amount, and many people don't know what it really is, or what the hell you do with it.
From deep in my soul.
Depending who you ask, some people think that social media is the greatest new innovation of our time, whereas other people think that it's the devil.
Because school is the devil.
But when you look at social media from a business perspective, I think you really only get to one solution, and that's that it's necessary. So let's take a look at some social media references from the past and how we got to where we are today.
Doc? Don't say a word.
Let's start with the 1920s. The psychology of sales, we'll call that this era. And it really started with the grandfather of marketing, Edward Bernays. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he was most notably known for the 1929 stint called Torches of Freedom, where feminist women, they were able to convince them to start smoking cigarettes. They got a big group of women together during a big parade, and they blew it up in the newspaper of Liberation, Torches for Freedom.
To address the problem of smoking in public, he linked Lucky Strike cigarettes to the women's liberation movement, arranging for young women to march down Fifth Avenue, smoking and calling the cigarettes Torches of Freedom.
And this led a ton of women to start smoking cigarettes, and it was a huge success. And he went on to do a multitude of other things in the marketing world. But another example of a great marketing scheme in the 20s was Burma Shave. So they would put one sign after the other leading up to gas stations, and it would have sticks like, if you hate big traffic lines, slow down so you can see the sign. And it worked. It was a huge success. They were eventually bought out by Philip Morris, which is a tire company, and that's a whole other marketing story in itself. But that's the 20s. Now in the 1930s, along came a man by the name of Arthur Nielsen. He started the company AC Nielsen in 1923, and many of you know this name because they still exist today. They're known for the big diary surveys that people do at their homes when they're a Nielsen family, so that we can do TV ratings and understand the behaviors of people that watch television. That's what they do today. They actually just put 15,000 of those set meters out in people's homes back in May of this year, which is going to affect about 7,000 households. So they're still running strong to this day. But in the 30s, Nielsen came along and started springboarding the industry of market research. So the idea behind that was, now that we know a little bit about marketing, how to advertise to people, let's start collecting data. So in the beginning, AC Nielsen started testing products before they would go to mass market. They started getting opinions from people before these products would even hit the shelves. And he did this for a few decades before eventually getting into television. So they're still around. At one time, they even could quote 40% of the world's viewership overall. And that's a huge deal. So the 30s, 40s, and 50s, I would even say, really go to Arthur Nielsen. So jumping to the 1960s, that was a very interesting era. We're going to call this the image and impressions era.
Such ingratitude after all the times I've saved your life.
Because this is where segmentation first occurred. Now, market segmentation is putting people into groups based on really psychographics. So the difference in psychographics and demographics is demographics bunch people together based on race, gender, sex, nationality, attributes of a person, whereas psychographics puts you in groups based on your lifestyle. So for instance, experientialists are people who like to spend money on experiences versus stuff. But there's a whole nother group for people that like to spend money on stuff. There's a group of people that are more socially conscious. There's a group of people that are brand loyal. So the 60s is where it was first used. By the 1970s, television had become a staple in American culture. So people were being subjected to 1,600 ads a day on average, with about 80 of them actually consciously sticking, so about 5%. So this was when the government started instituting regulations. This is when people started becoming very suspicious of the marketing industry. It's the era that we're going to call positioning.
To all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed. Bam!
McDonald's Big Mac, the great big sandwich with a great big taste.
People started buying products based on their merits and strengths. This is when Pepsi started fighting back against Coke, doing blind testing. This is when diet drinks came along, light beer came along. So the point is that these brands started trying to position themselves in people's minds. And that was the 70s. By the 1980s, cable television had started to explode. You had new networks like CNN, MTV. Home Shopping Network. You had QVC starting.
Presenting QVC, America's newest cable shopping channel. Your key to quality, value, and convenience. And now here with our first product is John Eastman.
Like the first product here on QVC is something to get us off to a clean start. This is from Windsor. This is the Windsor Shower Companion. And the Windsor Shower Companion is a combination AM/FM radio with a clock that you can use in your shower.
So ad agencies started merging together. So you had about 10 big players fighting for 15-second commercial slots that were actually being skipped over because the VCR was introduced. If you remember like I do, my grandmother would watch her soap operas and fast forward through the commercials, which if you look at television today in the DVR, we're still doing the same thing. But this was really called the decade of the deal. Trying to get those 15-second slots, getting attention, but also who could make a deal on which agencies were even going to survive in the first place.
Welcome to the 90s, Mr. Bong.
In the 1990s is when the internet comes around. So you've got your chat rooms, you've got your blogs. Nielsen's tracking 181 million blogs by the end of the 90s. You're trying to run banner ads, tile ads, using interruption marketing to get people's attention. So marketing starts to get a bad rap. They call it the black arts, convincing bald guys to buy hairbrushes.
Queer.
Bye, Felicia.
But traditional marketing still existed. You still had the 4 Ps, which I remember learning in my MBA program, which was your price, place, promotion, and product. But as the internet continues to grow into the 2000s, you start to see online communities start to form. Chat rooms, MySpace, AIM, a more complex set of interactions. Actually, one British psychologist, Robin Dunbar, suggested that social media goes back to our basic brain chemistry or environmental conditioning and basic psychology. I mean, why else would someone care that Martha had a frickin' frittata with her latte this morning? I don't care. But there's also important issues talked about, like potential cures for cancer or social injustices, for instance. But Dunbar pointed out that social grooming is a basic behavior of mammals, especially primates, like when monkeys would sit behind each other and pick out the knots and the bugs, and they would groom each other, except we do that in a different way, really through social media, essentially, is what Dunbar is saying. Because social grooming, you experience releases of endorphins, dopamine, and oxytocin. So these neurotransmitters in releasing dopamine is essentially what gives you enthusiasm. So the enthusiasm that you're feeling is really just small rewards that you feel good about. And it's highly addictive. Dopamine's highly addictive. That's why you see it in things like sex, drugs, and gambling especially. It's unexpected small rewards that makes it so addictive.
All in black.
But I'm not sitting here trying to say that social media is some funny, oversimplistic system. It's much deeper than that, and it's much more than that. Social media is also entertaining, it's a great news source, and it's a good way to keep up with family and friends. But more importantly, it's a great tool for business. So make sure to watch part 2 to find out why.
As the world turns.
From deep